should you become a manager? What are the things that you need to consider to make sure that a manager's role is really for you? And if you're watching this and you're thinking, I'm already a manager, it's a little too late, I'll have tips in this video for you as well, if you're in that manager role and you're questioning whether you're cut out for this. So first is to think about, why do you want to manage? Now, sometimes the answer is literally just plain. Like, my only growth path at a company or organization is a manager's path. There isn't an individual contributor path or employee expert path that allows me to be paid more. I want to be paid more, so I'll become a manager. And my tip for organizations is to create different career paths as much as possible, because there are people that just want to do the job, and there's a lot of ways that they can add value. They get better and better and better at it over time. They can even help to train people, but they don't want to actually take on that role as a manager. But when you do think about having that manager's role, it's important to think about, okay, why am I doing this? And sometimes it's going to be out of necessity. To get a promotion, you have to become a manager. But thinking about what it's actually like, things like my success. Do I care about getting that spotlight? Am I okay if I'm more focused on my team spotlight? Because that is really important as a manager when you have that shift to think about your team and how do I help them out? Because when that happens, you do tend to get your own kudos, but focusing on them can seem counterintuitive if your whole career you've been doing things to try to get those rewards. And so thinking about that shift. Other things are, what are the aspects of your job that you really like doing? And are you going to be able to give those up? Because I have a friend who's actually very, very senior executive. And they would say sometimes, when I see toll booth operators, I would love to just take their job for a day. And sometimes I think to myself, well, that toll booth operator would probably like your salary, but I understand the meaning behind it of sometimes when you're a manager and including as you have increased responsibility, you have those days where you think, I would just like to do something routine. But so knowing for yourself, what are those aspects of your current job that, again, you really like that you might miss if you move into a manager's role and you don't do those? Are you going to be able to give those up? Or are those going to be things that you think, oh, I'll just keep that because I really like doing it and it's like a mental palate cleanse? But just knowing a successful manager generally isn't doing a job, like their own job, and also managing in addition to that. Managing, even if you have individual tasks that you still have to do, managing is its own full-time job. And so just being aware of that. So additionally, thinking about things like performance. So performance, you may think about performance at times as maybe an annual review, if that's what you get, like an annual review, and some organizations don't have that. And so in thinking about for yourself, okay, performance management as a great manager is much more than just checking off the box on annual reviews. And if you focus on it through the year, then it actually makes your life a lot easier if and when you do have those formal reviews. But thinking about, are you feeling comfortable talking to team members about when they're doing well at work, or maybe a lot harder when they're not doing well? And figuring out what that looks like. Because as a manager, sometimes performance management for some is just telling people what they're doing wrong. But your goal is often going to be deeper than that. Asking questions, trying to figure out, okay, what's really going on? Is this a lack of understanding? Do they need more things? Is it motivation? And so working with each team member to figure that out. And are those things that you're actually interested in doing? And if you're currently a manager, then thinking to yourself, like, okay, you may be thinking of performance management, again, often as that annual or more formal review process. Because often, just in human nature, we don't do things until we're required to do it. But so stopping for yourself now and thinking, do my team members all know what's expected of them and how they're doing against those expectations? And thinking about that. And I say frequently, things like a ChatGPT can be your best friend as a manager, meaning it doesn't take the place of you as a manager and you shouldn't look to it to put in personal or company confidential information or anything like that. But some of those general tips of, if you haven't had performance conversations, putting in a prompt of, if I haven't talked about performance, and I probably should have earlier on, what are ways I can approach that with my team? Those are general prompts that can help you to give additional ideas that you can edit into your own voice and style. And so those are resources at your fingertips, even if you don't have actual resources from your organization or otherwise. But thinking also about being involved in people problems. And what I mean by that is, as a manager, you may go into it thinking a lot about, okay, Okay, there's goals, work has to get done. How can I influence those? And it's really important to think through that. But the aspects of being a manager that can often surprise people are the people-related aspects of the job. So you have a project. You feel like, okay, everybody knows what they're responsible for. They have to do it. All of a sudden, somebody has to be out unexpectedly. Somebody has a vacation and they forgot to tell you. And so they thought you knew already. And so you're scrambling of handling all of those sorts of things. Or two people on your team won't get along and refuse to communicate anyway but by email. And so you take a breath and think, oh my God, is this really my responsibility now? And as a manager, it's just understanding that life happens. And just like for you, life things that happen don't always happen at the most convenient time from a work perspective. So as a manager, it can feel really overwhelming, but just knowing going into it that people are going to have real life. If you're currently managing and thinking, okay, this is the part of the job that I would love to not do anymore because it just feels too hard. And so thinking about that as well, what are the aspects that really feel hard? Is it planning for the unexpected? Some ways you can do that are to have meetings with your teams or a project. And saying, not having a real, what would you do if someone, got sick unexpectedly? Not that kind of very specific example, but just saying generally, what can we do to plan as a team to have coverage or do things like that if someone is going to be out unexpectedly? Because I'd rather plan for it in advance rather than have it pop up and try to scramble of how to handle it. Those are conversations that can help. And again, life will happen. So sometimes it's balancing and saying, okay, this deadline will have to move. I'll have to help have that conversation. Or we're just going to have to do more with less for a little bit. And that's just the realities of it. And sometimes it is having those really candid conversations. But as much as you can plan in advance, thinking about those and knowing the real life that happens, even if things seem like, has this happened to anybody else? Every manager will tell you, every day can feel like sometimes a podcast series. So just knowing life will happen, but also you're humans, you'll balance it. And so asking for others as well. Because that's a tip, is to talk to existing managers. What are things that you wish you knew before you were a manager? Whether it's asking your own boss or others in manager roles, but having those conversations. And if you're currently a manager, it can feel really isolating. You may think that I'm the only person handling these things. But everybody in your organization and others, often those people manager roles have the same challenges. I saw this. It's why I created Manager Method, because I saw that as I worked at Yum Brands, there were restaurant managers at KFC that had the exact same challenges that senior partners at McKinsey did when I worked at that firm. And so just understanding within your organization, building those relationships can be so helpful to both to validate of yes, like sometimes you feel like you can't make it up, but also from the strategic perspective of what do I do in these situations? And so for organizations, in addition to making sure people have a realistic sense of the manager role before they take the role, also giving opportunities for managers to share those ideas, again, to have validation, to build relationships, but also to have those tips. Because often there's a manager in your organization that has something that they've done that's worked really well for them. And they think like it's no big deal, like no reason to share this with anybody else. But other managers hear it and they think, wait, can you repeat that? Because often people do have those ideas that can and should be spread to others. So giving those opportunities. Additionally, as a manager is thinking about sometimes, and I mentioned that sometimes your team is getting that kudos and you're not. It can feel especially thankless when you're in the balance, when you're looking to understand the expectations of senior leaders, your boss, all of those at the top of the org chart that you feel like, okay, we gotta meet what they need. And that is part of any person's job, but especially as a manager, you're not just, okay, figuring that out for yourself. Now you're talking about that to your teams. And so a big piece of what you can do and to know as a potential manager or even as a current manager, because that can feel really hard that you're in the middle. Like your team is asking for things, you ask senior leadership, they say no, you feel like you're constantly annoying or disappointing people. But a lot of it is about communication. And so to your teams, talking to them and asking, what are things that you think senior leaders should know? Or what are things that you'd like to see? And also saying, I can't promise anything, but what I can promise is that I will always communicate and explain to you, what I've done, what things can happen. If things can't, if that's a no right now, what that could look like later on. Because to finish up, one of the best qualities of great managers, and I challenge you for a second to stop and think about great managers you've had and what made them great. And also maybe those not great managers and what made them, we'll say, not great. But often the characteristics are completely free. A huge one is communication. And in your individual role, again, you may be used to just doing, and communication can be part of it if you're, talking to customers or you're working with colleagues. But as a manager, communication is more important than ever because your team is often curious about what's happening, how are decisions made, what does that mean? They have these questions, and you can't always give them all the information, and you won't always know it. But by talking to them and having open and honest conversations, you build levels of trust. And so all of a sudden, so many of those things, like if your team's not performing, okay, they may come to you proactively and explain what they're not getting. Or you have those conversations and they're upfront with you because they know they can trust you and that you'll help to figure out what they can do. And so all of the time in these conversations and communication, and a lot of these tips are completely free. And so my last tip is, as you're thinking about becoming a manager, sometimes people worry, am I going to be good at this job? Or if you're a manager now, you're wondering, am I good at this job? Am I cut out for this? And by watching this, especially by watching this at this point going on in this video, in caring about this, that is a quality that so many people want in a manager, is someone that cares. And so just thinking that you aren't going to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect. I have plenty of videos about what to do and how to recover, and I have ones coming up about what to do if you feel like you've messed up in a conversation with a team member. But just knowing that if you're able to pause and think about in situations, okay, what would I want to have happen to myself in this situation? And that doesn't mean that you can't think about others, but it can help to frame it a lot better. What would I want to have happen to a loved one in this situation? It can make things so much better, from conflict management when your team's not getting along to having that performance conversation. So you're able to have that in a way that again builds trust, that people see that you're trying to build them up and help them in this job, in their career, and that you care about them doing good work and also helping them to actually do what they can to live a full life outside of work. Those are the characteristics that I think can really help to become a manager. And so thinking about that, again, I've created all sorts of free resources. I have manager training courses, Manager 101 and 201 that can help, and there's plenty of others. So there are resources. So just know, the biggest tip is, if you're thinking about becoming a manager or you are one, caring about doing a good job for your team is one of the best things that you can do.